Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So earlier today I was online and I came across an article on the Griot about R&B singer Maxwell. Apparently Maxwell put out a tweet about Black History Month and it has caused some controversy on Twitter. A lot of people responded to him in a negative fashion after he issued the tweet. And basically, in his tweet, he said, including everyone in Black History Month is beneficial to all of us because all of us don't look like a typical black person. Something to that effect. And he included a photograph of Lena Horne in that tweet. And also, he issued another tweet. And in that tweet, he did a hashtag. And the hashtag was Black, Blue, Red, White, Beige History. So a lot of people responded to this stuff in a negative way, and I want to talk about this issue of inclusion. Now, if he's talking about including all these people in Black History Month, meaning in terms of teaching them about Black history, then I don't have any problem with that. I think that all people need to learn about Black history because ignorance is pervasive in American society and just world society. Many people, not only black people, are unaware of the contributions of black people. So that's the first thing, and I'll go back to that point a little bit later. The second thing is this, if he's talking about in terms of Black History Month, including all these other people, if he's referring to including other people's history and black history, I think that is, a mistake. And I'm going to explain to you why. Now, when you talk about history, obviously you include other groups of people in terms of how they affected black history. Obviously history can't be told in complete isolation from other groups of people. For instance, you can't talk about Jim Crow without talking about racist white people who enforced Jim Crow. And you can't talk about Jim Crow without talking about those few white people that were a part of the civil rights movement. So obviously, in that sense, you're going to include other people in your discussion of black history. For instance, you would talk about those who had been in coalitions with black people in black organizations. Like those, for instance, who helped found groups like the NAACP who happened to be white. You can't talk about Black History Month without including them in that discussion. And you can't talk about Black History Month, for instance, without talking about like how groups like the Panthers formed coalitions with other groups of people. So I get that. Like on that kind of level, any discussion of history for some, to some degree will involve discussions of other groups of people. And that's just a fact. But in terms of inclusion, and in terms of like just including other people's general history in black history and just incorporating the history of other groups of people, I think that is a mistake. Black History Month was needed because for so long, black history had been negated. For so long, black history had been blotted out. For so long, black history had been forgotten, forsaken, and discarded like trash. And because of that, black people had lost a knowledge of themselves. We had been stripped of our history. Once we were brought here to this country, we were cut off from our history. There were deliberate efforts to wipe out our history and our culture, our languages, our customs, and have that completely refashioned so that we would no longer be Africans, so that we would no longer have ties to our motherland, so that instead of being free, independent Africans, we became dependent Negroes and colored people, products of oppression, products of white supremacy. And because of that disconnect, because we were robbed of our history, robbed of knowledge of self, we had become self-hateful. We had reached a point where we had develop hatred towards ourselves. And while at the same time that we had hatred of self, we idolized these other groups of people. We idolized white people because we were taught in history that all the great contributions to civilization were brought about because of white people. We were taught that we had contributed nothing to human civilization. We were taught that we were a race of savages, a race that hadn't contributed anything to human civilization, a race that was reduced to barbarism and cannibalism. That's the image of Africans that we were taught. That's the image of Africa that we were taught. That is the image of the so-called dark continent that we were taught generation after generation. And that indoctrination made us hate ourselves, made us hate being African, hate being black. And that hatred is still with us today. It is with us when we talk about each other based on skin complexion, when we have derogatory things to say about Africa and Africans. We are so full of self-hatred, so lacking of a knowledge of self, that we don't want to identify with our mother continent of Africa. We would rather be anything but African. Some of us have gone so far as to say that we would rather be aliens from another planet than Africans. That's how messed up we are. That's how indoctrinated we have become, because we haven't had black history. We didn't have a knowledge of our history. And that's why the brother Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, found the need to teach about African history, found the need to set up Black History Week, which will later become Black History Month, so that we can know about our contributions. I mean, here we are. This year, and I think it was this year, that movie Hidden Figures came out, talking about the contributions of African American women to the NASA space program. I'm a man who's learned a lot about black history. I don't claim to be some kind of expert or anything like that, but I've learned a lot. And sadly, when that movie came out, that was my first time hearing about African American contributions to the NASA program. I didn't know about those sisters who contributed so much to that program. And that's a damn shame. Here we are, we're taught about all these other races of people. We're taught about the contributions of the Europeans to world history. We're taught about the Chinese, the Japanese, the Arabs. We're taught about the Inca civilization, the Aztecs. We're taught about all these different ethnicities, but we are not taught about ourselves. It's only in college. By the time we get around to history, black history, real black history, outside of just the civil rights movement, outside of just slavery and all that kind of stuff, many of us are adults at that point. We're in college learning for the first time about the African contributions to human civilization. And I think that that's a disgrace. And as long as we live in a society that pushes our history to the margins, pushes us out of the history books, there will always be a need for black history. And that history has to be focused on us, because otherwise we get pushed to the margins as we are today. We're taught that all we were was slaves. The image that comes to mind when people think of Africa is the image of black people swinging from trees and living in huts and living a primitive, savage type of life. That's the image that we have of Africa, because our minds have been poisoned and we have not been taught our history. So I don't think it's time for us to be incorporating all these other groups of people. You don't see these other people going out of their way to incorporate us in their history. These people of all these different ethnicities, many of them don't have any respect for black people. Many of them. Racism is a part of their culture a lot of times. As I said in another video, it doesn't matter whether you're an American, whether you're an Arab, or whether you're a Christian, or whether you're a Jewish civilization, or whether you're an atheist civilization, a capitalist, a socialist, or whatever. In many of those societies, black people are at the margins of those societies. We are at the bottom of that totem pole. So to hell with incorporating all these other people in our history. Let's build ourselves up. Let's teach ourselves about ourselves. Let's learn who we are, so that when we interact with others, we'll be interacting with them on a equal playing field. We will be interacting with them with confidence and conviction. So, those are my thoughts about this issue. Tell me what you think. Please rate, comment, subscribe, and donate. Peace.